Hi everybody, today we are looking at Australia's interdependence with other economies. Globalisation provides the means for increased interaction between the consumers, producers, workers and governments in one country's economy with their counterparts in the economies of other countries. Our focus is on the economic issues associated with globalisation and the way they affect all participants in the global economy. Globalisation can be a driving force for economic growth. As countries encourage free trade with other countries, new markets are created. Selling more products increases company profits, and this means companies can afford to hire more workers. As a result, both companies and workers become wealthier and the standard of living improves. As discussed earlier, a trade surplus with our trading partners will result in an increase in wealth coming into the country and contribute to the circular flow of money. Trade helps to ensure that resources are used efficiently to produce goods and services. It enables nations to specialise in the products that they make efficiently or grow naturally. At the same time, producers competing on a global rather than a national level must operate efficiently to keep prices competitive. This increased focus on efficiency and cost savings provides flow-on benefits for both producers and consumers. The internet is also beneficial for globalisation as it allows huge amounts of data to be accessed or shared very quickly, facilitating the exchange of information and ideas between individuals, businesses and governments around the world. As e-commerce or commercial transactions increase, isolated groups such as rural exporters will be able to operate more competitively. This will provide growth opportunities for many country towns and out-of-the-way businesses that might otherwise have difficulty in reaching a large market. The downside to globalisation is that globalisation can create unfair working conditions for many workers in poor countries. Large transnational corporations may shift their production factories to poorer countries where they can hire labour cheaply. These poor workers may be forced to work long hours in unsafe and unhealthy factory environments for a very small wage. Workers in the home country of the transnational corporation may lose their jobs altogether. Transnational corporations also have the ability to undercut prices charged by competitors, often forcing smaller producers to close down. This results in job losses, less competition and less choice for consumers. Removal of competition can then allow the transnational corporations to raise product prices. As the world population grows, demand for goods and services increases. Meeting this demand requires greater use of renewable and non-renewable natural resources. The manufacturing processes involved in producing the increased quantities of goods demanded results in increased pollution levels and many dangerous byproducts. Other serious environmental problems associated with meeting increased demand include the hole in the ozone layer, destruction of old-growth forests, extinction of many plant and animal species, and climate change. Both consumers and producers are becoming increasingly aware of the need for environmental sustainability. A number of international organisations oversee the flow of goods, services and finance around the world. These include the World Trade Organisation, the International Monetary Fund, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. So the World Trade Organisation was established in 1995. The World Trade Organisation administers the rules of international trade. It is an influential organisation that has the power to rule on international trade disputes. The International Monetary Fund was established after World War II. Its main function is to provide an orderly way of financially assisting developing countries. The OECD. This organisation helps economic and social policy for its members. Its 30 members countries include Australia, Japan, Korea, New Zealand and countries in Western Europe and North America. So what does globalisation mean for Australia? It has affected our country in many ways. Many Australian companies now operate internationally. increasing their profits by selling their goods and services worldwide. Some have established their production centres in regions such as Asia to reduce labour costs. Globalisation has forced Australian farmers to compete at a global level to sell products such as wheat and wool. Previously, they could rely on selling their crops and stock to established trading partners. Overseas investment by Australian companies helps to create employment and wealth in those overseas countries. Similarly, investment in Australia by overseas companies may create growth and employment opportunities that improve our standard of living. Importing a huge variety of goods and services allows consumers greater choice, usually at cheaper prices. Overseas made products in almost every Australian home include electrical goods, CDs, food items, clothing and footwear, numerous television programs, and increasingly the family car. An import is a good or service that is produced overseas and brought into Australia. Businesses bring imports into the country and then sell them to other businesses or directly to the public. When we travel and spend money on an overseas holiday, this has the same effect on the economy as importing goods and services. In this case, we are taking our money to other countries to spend on goods and services there rather than physically bringing the products to our country. The economic effect is that the money goes to overseas businesses, so the impact on the Australian economy is the same. Similarly, when overseas tourists come to Australia and spend their money, this has the same impact on our economy as exporting goods and services. So in this case, money from overseas consumers is coming into Australia and being paid to Australian businesses, just as if those businesses had sent their products overseas. Economists sometimes refer to the spending of money by Australians overseas as invisible imports, while the spending of money here by overseas visitors is referred to as invisible exports. So Australia imports many products and does so for many reasons. Australian producers may not make a product as efficiently as it is made in another country, or a particular raw material may not be produced in sufficient quantities to satisfy demand. In Australia, spending on imports is higher in most years than spending on exports. Bringing imports into the country has both positive and negative effects for consumers and producers. Positive effects are that there is an enormous range of goods and services for consumers to buy. Australian producers are forced to make goods and services using resources in the most efficient way because they have to compete against cheaper imported products. Importing goods from other countries encourages those countries to buy our exports. Australian workers may move overseas and learn other languages and cultures. More trade between countries encourages peaceful relationships and cultural exchanges. The negative effects of importing is that Australian jobs may be lost to countries with cheaper labour costs. Imported resources may lower employment opportunities for Australian workers. Australian industries find it difficult to compete with the lower production costs of some overseas countries, so this leads to either a closure of industries and loss of skills, and that the money leaves the country to circulate overseas rather than in Australia. This affects our exchange rate of the Australian dollar. In the globalised economy, the manufacture of many goods that we purchase is not restricted to one country. All goods are manufactured using a combination of raw materials, human skill and effort, and factory buildings and equipment. Manufacturing today can have different combinations of these three resources located in many different parts of the world, with the final product sold in a variety of different countries. The combination of different resources, businesses, and information that moves a product or service from producer to consumer is known as the supply chain. A major concern of any transnational corporation is the management of the supply chain. Raw materials have to be sourced from various parts of the world, and these raw materials may then be processed in a number of different countries. The manufacturing steps may occur in several locations before the finished product is available for sale. So in class tomorrow we're going to do an inquiry and we're going to look at supply chain management. And it can be illustrated by examining the production of a product, for example Nokia. So if you're going to use Nokia phones, you would look at the raw materials where they were sourced, the production of the components, the assembly where it's assembled throughout the world, sustainability issues, and the market share. But we'll talk more about that in class tomorrow. The transnational corporation represents the highest level of involvement in global business, where national borders do not represent barriers to trade, but instead are seen as merely lines drawn on a map. So consequently, transnational corporations conduct a large percentage of their business outside their home country. The degree to which a business is a genuine transnational company can be measured by examining the proportion of its sales that occur outside its home country. In recent years, over 60% of the 175 largest economic entities in the world have been transnational corporations. If the wealthiest transnational corporations have revenue greater than many small to medium countries, they have enormous power. If a transnational corporation uses this power in the best interests of the people of those countries in which it operates, those people can benefit enormously. Investment from transnational corporations brings money into the country, bringing economic growth to that country. Parent companies and their subsidiaries may share intellectual property, such as design and technology concepts. This helps less developed economies become more advanced. The flow of ideas and talent is also supported by the movement of staff between countries, even though they remain employed by the same transnational corporation. The standard of living of people in less developed countries can be improved as jobs are created. Transnational corporations sometimes contribute towards the provision of new transport links to service their premises, and this can be of benefit to the local community. We've had that recently with Adani starting up the rail line for its coal export, just near Bowen. So we have it happen here as well. So some negatives from transnational companies. There may be very little that the government of a host country can do simply because of the financial power wielded by these large companies. So some transnational corporations have been found to have acted in ways that have exploited host countries and their people. They often set up production in countries that have high levels of poverty and low wages. So then they employ young children, pay workers the minimum amount possible, and provide very little in the way of safe working conditions or employee benefits, such as meal breaks, sick pay, holiday pay, or superannuation. Profits are often returned to the home country rather than being used to benefit the economy of the host country. And many transnationals will bring their own managerial and skilled staff with them, leaving only menial work for the local population. Many transnational corporations have a poor record in environmental matters. They often exploit the laxity of environmental regulations in the host country to pollute the air and waterways there. Transnational companies often use complex systems of transfer pricing to avoid paying tax on profits earned in the host country. This means that the government of the host country does not gain much additional revenue from the operations of the transnational corporations. As a result of international concerns over the activities of some transnational corporations, the United Nations identified some key responsibilities for the largest transnational corporations. Do not use forced or compulsory labour. Respect the rights of children to be protected from economic exploitation. Provide a safe and healthy working environment. Pay workers enough to ensure an adequate standard of living for them and their families. Recognise the rights of employees to join unions and other collective bargaining organisations. Okay, so that's a wrap for today. I'll see you in class tomorrow and have a bit of a think about the supply chain management and a business that you might like to investigate. Okay, thanks everybody.